Hello, botanists. It's me, Stephanie, and we're going to talk about photosynthesis today. This is going to be a much shortened down version of photosynthesis, and I highly recommend you taking the class Plant Physiology in your future if you get a chance to, if you're interested in today's talk, because we're really just going to skirt the surface. What we're going to do is we're going to put a lot of concepts into this black box, which is something that's sort of where magic happens, but really it's not magic, it's reality. It's just that we don't have time to explain it. So if I reference the black box, that's what I'm talking about. So photosynthesis is a really important part of life, as you might know. It is sort of half of the story. The other half is respiration, which is done in mitochondria, while photosynthesis is done in chloroplasts. So photosynthesis uses carbon dioxide and water, which happens to be the products of respiration. And then respiration uses sugars and oxygen, which happen to be the products of photosynthesis. And so it's a real special connection, probably not a total coincidence. And really, we are only going to be talking about photosynthesis today. Just be aware that, plants also do respire, and so do you. You do respiration. You don't do photosynthesis, though. Unfortunately, that would be really cool if you could. So here is photosynthesis in a nutshell. CO2, which is carbon dioxide, and water, H2O, make sugar and O2, which is oxygen. Okay, well, the truth is that sunlight is the energy that's sort of making this reaction occur. Sugar is the photosynthate, you would say. It's sort of it's the product of photosynthesis. And oxygen is also one of the products of photosynthesis. And it's really convenient for us because we need it, but that's really kind of saying it the other way around, because oxygen was definitely here first. Plants do not produce oxygen so that we can breathe. No, we breathe because our early ancestors evolved to an atmosphere that had a lot of oxygen in it, and it sort of needed to use it. It was useful. Okay, so chlorophyll is one of the parts of the story here. Chlorophyll is a pigment. It's one of multiple pigments that are photosynthetic, that are found in plants. Some plants have a lot of chlorophyll A, while others have a lot of carotenoids, and vice versa. And chlorophyll, most plants look green to us because they're reflecting green light. And they're reflecting the green light because they're really good at absorbing all of the reds and the blues. They don't absorb the green, though. They reflect it. And so the reds and the blues are just the right wavelengths for photosynthesis. So here is the beginning of the story. Here's a patch of a leaf in the upper right. And notice that there is sunlight hitting it. All right. Well, if we look at kind of inside of this leaf patch, right, we've got that brown surface. That's actually the top surface, which would probably look green to you, actually. And then inside all of these green cells, these are probably mesophyll cells, and they're filled with chloroplasts. And so, as you can see with this picture on the upper left, we've got a single cell, and inside of it, multiple chloroplasts. Those are those green beans. And in a cell that has many chloroplasts, those chloroplasts may be situated in various ways. Now, the vacuole, remember, that's that really big structure sort of right in the middle of the cell that's going to be holding a lot of water and maybe storing some other things. And in darkness, chloroplasts tend to go to the bottom of cells. Not quite sure why, actually. Not folks don't have a total understanding on that, but that tends to be what happens. In low light, they want to make the most of the surface area of the cell, and so they're going to really sort of expose themselves to the light and take advantage of as much light as possible, while in high light they might want to avoid direct contact with the light. And so they sort of might go to the sides of cells. Okay, and here's an actual, a more kind of detailed picture of what one really might look like. And now this is a picture of the inside of a chloroplast. We have kind of two adjacent chloroplasts here, and inside of them are thylakoids. What are those? Well, when we now look not just inside of a cell, but inside of a chloroplast within a cell, which is what we're doing in this lower image, we see these sort of stacks of discs, or what apparently looks like discs in this diagram. Well, these are the stacks that are housing most of the photosynthetic machinery. And so what these stacks are called they're called a granum, which is a stack of thylakoids. So like one of those little pancakes is a thylakoid, while the whole stack of pancakes is a granum. And the thylakoid membrane is where all of the exciting photosynthesis actually happens. Okay, so yeah. Notice this other term, stroma, here. Well, stroma is kind of everything that's outside of these thylakoids. Okay, so again, it's these membranes of these pancakes, if you will, the membranes of the thylakoids that are, that's the site of part of photosynthesis. Okay. So photosynthetic reactions actually take place in two parts. There's part A, and then there's part B here. And sometimes part A is called the light reaction of photosynthesis, and part B is sometimes called the dark phase of photosynthesis. But really, they both happen in the light, and so we're just going to call them these things: A, the energy transduction reaction, and B, the carbon fixation reaction, which again actually is also known as Calvin cycle. So again, this is all really happening in the chloroplasts. Light energy is required. And we've got a crazy figure here. So, wow. We've got a couple of words that look familiar, and then lots of very unfamiliar stuff. Okay, there's a good word. Thylakoid. We've met that one so far. Oh, and there's stroma, too. So, let's remind ourselves what these are based on that previous diagram. So, the thylakoid membrane is the sort of the membrane of one of these sort of, I keep saying pancakes, the outside of one of these pancakes in a stack. And so looking at it this way, the thylakoid membrane in this diagram is sort of the thick part, and we've got some sort of transmembrane molecules that are present in the membrane. So in this diagram, the inside of the chloroplast is called the stroma, and so that'd be outside of the thylakoid membrane. While the inside of the thylakoid, you might call it the thylakoid lumen, sort of inside of the thylakoid membrane, as opposed to outside. Okay, so across this membrane, we've got these crazy things. We're not going to get into the details here. We're gonna do the black box thing here. So photosystem 2, PS2, photosystem 2. It's just this really fancy molecule that sits in the membrane of the thylakoid, and what it does is it is able to sort of transform the sunlight's rays, photons, into energy, which then splits water. So think about the basics of water. It's H2O. It splits into oxygen, two of them, and hydrogen, a proton. And then we've got an electron that sort of gets spit out of this process of splitting water molecules as well. And so really, the oxygen is no longer needed in this process. It's just a byproduct. It's literally just a waste product for them. They don't need it. Again, very convenient for us. We do need it. It's great. But what happens next? Again, we have this other black box thing, PS1, photosystem 1. And it too is sort of using light sort of filtered through chlorophyll. And it's getting that electron sort of out to the other side. And so now we've got this energized electron in the stroma space. Okay, the hydrogen electron goes through another one of these black box transmembrane protein things called ATP synthase. Okay, and in getting the hydrogen molecule out, we also energy is actually produced from this. And energy, I know this is a lot of craziness right now, just bear with me. Energy mixed with this thing called ADP, mixed with a phosphate group, these things which would have been present in the stroma, form ATP. Oh my gosh, ATP. Now, this is an acronym for adenosine triphosphate, I think, and it's the basic sort of basic unit of energy in life forms, if you will. And so this is essentially this unit of energy, ATP, and this is great from the plant's perspective. Okay, so that original energy just now to make the ATP was sort of a byproduct of getting the hydrogen molecule out. And now that we've got the electron and the hydrogen out, it actually mixes with something called NADP to make this other really fancy energy molecule called NADPH. Okay, so the most important things that I just said out of all of that jumbling is that ATP and NADPH were formed from that original H2O molecule. And ATP and NADPH are really the basic unit of energy that is needed in all sorts of areas, really, in the cell. But they're needed somewhere very nearby. So, okay, so right now let me just do a quick summary here of the energy transduction reactions part of photosynthesis. What went in was sunlight and water. Water, yes, from the roots. And what came out was NADPH and ATP. Great. Well, actually what really went in was sunlight and H2O plus NADP and ADP and a phosphate group to make to sort of recharge, if you will, this energetic molecule, the NADPH, and this other energetic, fancy molecule, ATP. Okay. So this is the energy transduction. It's called the energy transduction reaction because it's got energy from the sunlight, and transduction it sort of means transforming some molecule or some signal from one thing to another, and that's what happened here with ATP and NADPH. They were transformed from ADP and NADP. So this is all happening in and around the thylakoid membrane. Okay. Well, we've got part A done with photosynthesis. The energy transduction reaction, this is the part that is really directly related to light. It uses the energy from light. But that NADPH and the ATP that we just talked about, that was just formed, it's used in the next part here. This is the other half of the story. This is like I said, it's sometimes called the dark part, the dark reaction of photosynthesis, or the Calvin cycle. It's also known as carbon fixation reactions, and this is taking place in the stroma. So we're going to really simplify it like we just did for that first part. So we've got the ATP and the NADPH from the energy transduction reactions just now from the first part of photosynthesis. It's right next to it all. Well, there's this other thing called ribulose bisphosphate that exists in the chloroplast stroma. It's just sort of there. And between that and carbon dioxide, which we haven't accounted for that yet, that's one of the starting points for photosynthesis, and water. Actually, we use energy. We use that energy, ATP and NADPH. And since we're using this energy, they kind of go back to that original form, the ADP and the NADP, which can then just kind of go back to that first part where it can get recharged again. Well, this energy was used to make glyceraldehyde. Okay, glyceraldehyde is a very small basic unit of a carbohydrate, of a sugar, and this is a photosynthate. Great. So this is now finally the product of photosynthesis. I mean, you really have to go through both of these steps. But the thing is that we're actually not totally done here. Rubisco is an enzyme that catalyzes this reaction in order to make glyceraldehyde during this whole Calvin cycle. And actually, that glyceraldehyde isn't immediately all used in the rest of the plant. It's actually recycled immediately, more or less, into this process. And the Calvin cycle will continue several times, actually. And it's going to kind of continue using ATP, and it's going to go around several times. And actually, only one sixth, of the glyceraldehyde produced in this process is used in the rest of the plant. In other words, only 1/6 of it is the net photosynthetic productivity. Not extremely efficient, as you can see. Yeah, this is what's exported outside of the chloroplast itself. Okay, well, wow, that was a lot of information. I know it was really fast, but that's one of the cool things about the this virtual life is you can rewatch some of that. Go watch it in slow motion if you have to, or pause things. Cool, great. I know I skipped a lot of really fancy details there, but like I said, Plant Phys is a really cool class that I hope you guys take in the future if you liked that. Now, you might be wondering, who were the first organisms to do photosynthesis? Like, who invented photosynthesis? Well, no one invented photosynthesis, but to certain organisms, this was a really useful way to live. Because imagine a world without any, multicellular organisms whatsoever. Maybe no photosynthetic organisms either. Bacteria and archaea, these really primitive organisms, they were getting energy by either having to sort of somehow ingest something, or by getting energy from like chemicals, really kind of maybe in difficult ways. Maybe this was maybe exploiting the light to help them sort of literally make food was a really efficient way for them to make a living. And so here's who first started it. These things called cyanobacteria. Yes, they are in this sort of larger group of organisms called bacteria. And what happens is these photosynthetic pigments are present in and around the endomembrane system and kind of throughout the cell. And really this sort of frees up the cell from having to really worry about finding food. As long as they're near a light source, they will produce their own food. And so this is very beneficial. Yeah, cyanobacteria, those were the first to do it. Maybe 3 billion or so years ago. Long time ago. 3 billion or so years. Way before eukaryotes. So these cyanobacteria sometimes form colonies, in which case you might call them filamentous, sort of elongate and linear, like a hair filament or something. In this picture on the left, this might be sort of what they would look like under a microscope in the lab, if we were to be looking at them. But the picture on the right is sort of a more three-dimensional rendition of them. They're actually more or less cylindrical. Okay. And they have all sorts of specialized cells associated with the filamentous colonies. These specialized cells might be a way for them to sort of more or less sporulate, to become to kind of get them into a form that can withstand harsh conditions, maybe dry or hot or cold conditions or something like that. Or these other specialized cells might allow them to do things like nitrogen fixation, or help them with chemical reactions of other sorts. But the main reason why they are so successful is because they are doing photosynthesis. Cool. And this actually makes them very interesting. Maybe more than interesting. Maybe intriguing to organisms who are ingesting bacteria. They're like, oh, this one has a lot of sugars in it, and now I'm going to try to eat a lot of it. Well, yes, this happens with cyanobacteria. A lot of things are interested in eating it. More on that in the future. So bacteria, these, if we look at this sort of giant cladogram that represents all of life on Earth, more or less, in a nutshell. We've got bacteria over here. We've got archaea in the middle, this other kind of group of primitive organisms. And then we've got eukaryotes over here. So like you, personally, you are right over here in this animal lineage. Fungi, mushrooms, plants, the things we've been talking about all semester. Here they are way over here. But the things I've been talking about that do photosynthesis, that first invented photosynthesis, it's these things over here, cyanobacteria, way on the left. Virtually the opposite side of this giant cladogram. Now, the truth is that plants also do photosynthesis, but they didn't invent it. They sort of stole it, more or less, from the cyanobacteria. And that's sort of where we are going to be going in our next lectures. So more on that in the future. Okay, bye.